What are some common mistakes that writers make in the first two stages of writing the screenplay, which compromises the first act and then subsequent acts? What are usually the first parts that end up compromising the entire work?
Yeah, I would go actually a little further with your question. I would say if you have problems in the first two stages, it's impossible for your script to work. I have this sort of motto, and that is, if you're having story problems, all roads lead to the hero's outer motivation. Because one of the biggest issues, one of the most difficult things for writers to really embrace is this idea that at the very foundation of any story is a visible goal that the hero wants to cross at the end of the story. They'll get so caught up in the inner journey, in the depth or dimension of the character, or in the themes they want to deliver, or they'll just think the premise is good, so they get lost in a thicket of events and plotting until finally they're just coming up with new ideas and adding idea after idea, and it becomes so complicated and so confusing that there's no story there. If you think about it, most Hollywood movies in particular are based on very simple story ideas. Even if you take a story that you think is fairly complex, like Inception, okay? That seems pretty complicated. I had a little trouble grasping some of that, but it's very core, it's very simple. A group of people wants to penetrate a person's dreams down to a layer where they can change his behavior without him knowing it. And that's it. I was able to say that in 5 seconds and 1 sentence. And that, everything is built on that goal. And if you have that kind of clear through line, and if when you say what that goal is, everybody gets the same image of what achieving that goal is, then you've laid a foundation that most scripts don't honestly have. And it's odd because it sounds simple. It is simple, but it's not easy. Because I think for those of us who write, or for storytellers, we so want to get into character, we so want to get into deeper levels of meaning, we so want it to be original and different and complex and special that we lose sight of, first I've got to have this very simple through line. So that's the number one thing. One of the biggest problem in stages 1 and 2 is it doesn't lead to a clear, visible finish line that anyone can envision, whether they're reading the script or watching the movie. They know what they're rooting for. Second thing is not showing the everyday life of the character before they get into the story moving forward. We have to have a setup. It can be very brief, or a character can be on the move, so to speak, action-wise. They can have just arrived in a town and we see them going, or they're going to a meeting, or going to meet with a hitman, or whatever it might be. But nonetheless, it has to convey this is who this character's been for some time, and it has to create empathy.
Like Rambo. He arrives.
Yeah, yeah, exactly.
Brian Dennehy.
So we'll find out what happened prior to that, but the first big event that's going to happen to him doesn't happen on page 1. We first have to get acquainted and identify or empathize with this character. And that empathy must occur immediately. We have to empathize before we start seeing what the flaws to the character are, before we start recognizing what this inner conflict is, or what this identity is, or what dark places they might go. First, we have to just connect with them emotionally. And the third thing I would say is jumping from the setup right to the outer motivation. In other words, I think because screenwriters are inundated with the idea that you got to grab the reader right away, and you got to get things going, and Hollywood movies move fast, and so on. All of that is true, but it doesn't mean you rush the story. What it means is you start building in conflict as soon as you can. But you don't rush the story. It's going to take all of Act 1 to get your hero to the point where they really begin pursuing that visible finish line. And if you start at page 10 with them pursuing the goal, your script is going to die around page 70, because you can't sustain a single goal that long. So you've got to take the whole stage 1 and stage 2 just to build up, to create the opportunity in the new situation, to get them oriented, to build up to the point where they have the goal, and then they take that first step. And that's what has to happen at 25%.